Hello, everybody. We'll begin in just a minute. We've got Jigar here, who's on time and ready to go, which is always an exciting part of our business. So just, and it's good to see you, Jigar. It's been a long time.
Great to be here.
Yeah, and I'm in a temporary space in my house. We're moving post coming out of COVID now. We're moving around things in our house that had been there for a couple of years, and so I'm in a guest bedroom today, and just bear with me.
Better acoustics, right?
Better acoustics, a little bit of a frou-frou background, but it all works. I stuck my kids in the corner there. So I'm going to begin. Are you ready, Jigar? Here
Yes.
we go. So, hey everybody, this is Simon Rosenberg from NDN. This is one of our periodic deep dives with policymakers, innovators, thought leaders, elected officials who are leading the country forward. And I'm very lucky today to have an old friend with us, Jigar Shah, who's been a thought leader in what has always been an important space, but is increasingly important now. I think there's so many streams flowing into this river. I mean, in terms of reviving domestic manufacturing, countering Russia's aggression, finally doing what it takes to take on climate change, spurring American innovation. Jigar's at the center of all of this. He runs the Loan Programs Office at the Department of Energy. He's sort of a visionary legend in the field, so to speak, in trying to accelerate the clean tech revolution here in the United States. And, for those of you who are new to NDN, we're a think tank here in Washington. We were significantly involved in the last sort of big discussion around clean technology back in the 2 decades ago. It's hard to believe, but in the latter part of the aughts and the beginnings of the next decade, we played a major role in introducing the concept of clean infrastructure to the Obama world back in 2007, 2008, and 2009. So all of the work that Jigar's doing we're deeply supportive of and are so proud that he's taken the time to go in and serve. I mean, we got the right guy for an important job. And Jigar, I guess what I wanted to start with today is, how's it going? I mean, you've been at this for a while. There's lots of victories to celebrate, but lots of challenges ahead. What do you think? How's it going?
It really is amazing. I have to say, I think that if you remember the Obama days, there was a lot of drill baby drill in that campaign. There's a lot of all of the above and others. And I think that, and I also think that when you think about the venture capital scenario there, right? I mean, you're talking about billions of dollars of venture capital. Today, we got $60 billion of venture capital that got invested last year alone into our sector, right? And so in C rounds and D rounds, and then people who SPAC'd and went public, et cetera. So I think the amount of equity available today to really make this happen is much larger than you had 13, 14 years ago. And so my job is made a lot easier because the ecosystem is a lot better for all the work that you put in those years ago.
And so tell us about today. I mean, what's your focus? What do you how's it going? I mean, are you pleased with what you've been able to see so far and what you've been able to get done?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the starting at the macro, and then we'll go into the micro. I think on the macro side, I think that for years, the Congress has been very supportive of providing tax credits for technologies, right? So whether it's the 45Q for carbon sequestration and storage, or there's a credit for nuclear, there's a credit for hydro, geothermal. There was a credit for renewable natural gas. I mean, anaerobic digesters, all sorts of things, right? And then you've also got demonstration programs that have been, fairly lightly funded at DOE for many years. Those things were going on. Clearly, Department of Energy got a big boost in the arm with the bipartisan infrastructure law, where you've got $62 billion that went into DOE, which is really the largest investment into the Department of Energy since its formation. And so it was a clear signal from Congress that they want DOE to now be in the demonstration and deployment business and not just the R&D business, right? So I think that's a big deal. You also have just a gap where, you know, the people who take advantage of tax credits are people who pay taxes, right? So you're talking about large institutions like JP Morgan Chase or Citibank or Bank of America, or you've got other banks that have been active like Wells Fargo or, you know, Truist or insurance companies or others, right? You can imagine that those people are generally not going to be the people who want to do first of a kind deployments, right? And so they want to do more solar and wind. And so that's why Pete Domenici created the Loan Programs Office in 2005 during the Energy Act. But as the secretary said in her confirmation hearing, we went dormant. And so a lot of those companies didn't have us to put due debt. And so what you found were that there were some companies who made it through the gauntlet because they had the ability to raise equity and they just 100% equity financed themselves, right? And there were others who were able to get support from, let's say, the New York Green Bank or the Connecticut Green Bank or others, right? But that's not a systemic way of getting things done, right? And so, so when we came into office, we went out strategically to folks. We had about $44 billion of additional loan capacity left. And, you know, the goal was trust, right? Hey, you know, like, obviously you don't think you're going to be treated well in this office, so you've never bothered to apply, right? I mean, we had maybe 3 active applications when I came into office, right? And so we're now at 77 active applications, and that's after turning another 15 applications inactive that we received, right? Because they're not really ready to get through our office. Those 77 applications represent $70 billion worth of loan proceeds, right? That's what they've requested. And we're averaging over an application a week coming into the Loan Programs Office, right? And so that's a lot of what we focused on last year, right? Was getting people to trust us, because it's 500 hours worth of work to put an application in. It's not just like a app where you just fill out 3 things and then you get something done. I mean, they have to fill out an entire data room. They have to go to S&P or Moody's and get a credit rating, a shadow credit rating on their project. It's a lot of work and probably a couple $100,000 of expense on their part, right, to get in. Our average loan size is $900 million, and our median loan size is $500 million. So we really are talking about substantial infrastructure. And we got our first, you know, conditional commitment done in December. We've got a couple more that are in advanced stages now, and we've got probably something on the order of $20 billion, we think, of applications that we're going to be able to get through the process this year.
A lot of money. And taking a step back, Jigar, what technologies are you most excited about right now for maybe people who are not as expert in all of this? I mean, when we talk about clean tech and the clean energy revolution that's coming, what are you most excited about in the sort of the short to medium term right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that my excitement is I'm sort of a different kind of excitement guy than most people are. And so I'm less excited by the popular science Wired magazine stuff. And I'm more excited about, $1 trillion scale. So when you think about where we are now, we've got about $1.2 to $1.4 trillion that has already been raised into funds for the deployment of clean technology, right? That somebody's already raised it and they're managing it at a fund in, some nondescript office in New York City. And so you've got that money. Now they all were going to invest in solar and wind, which is great, right? Now there's only a couple $100 billion of that a year for them to actually access, right? And then they said, okay, fine, you know what? We're going to do battery storage too, because we've got too much money and we got to start putting it out the door. And now what I'm doing is saying, actually, there's about 20 additional sectors ready to go that you guys should be considering, right? So for instance, we've got applications that have come in for rollouts of EV charging networks. And what's exciting about that is, I think version 1.0 of that is, hey, why don't we just replace all the gas stations with EV charging stations? I think you and I both know that that's not how things work, right? Version 2.0 of that is, hey, let's make sure that like people in rural areas and, low and moderate income areas have charging stations. Just putting a random charging station there doesn't work either, right? And then now version 3.0 that we're getting in our office is people are actually saying, you know what, why don't we put a car there? And why don't we rent that car out in a weekly rental from that charging spot? And so while the car is no longer there, well, it's available for everyone else to use to charge. But we're also, helping with subprime auto loans, which is $1 billion a month. And we're helping people get into electric vehicles for reliable transportation for $200 a week, right? It's a pretty big deal. I mean, it's pretty hard to get a car from Hertz or Enterprise these days for $200 a week. And so now you're starting to see that level of imagination go across all of our sectors. So we've got probably close to $15 billion worth of applications that have come in for advanced biofuels, right? Sustainable aviation fuels and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the experiments from 15 years ago are finally coming to fruition. Like fulcrum biofuels, I think, was a dream back in 2009. I think it's going to turn on next month, right? And using municipal solid waste to turn it into biofuels. That's amazing, right? You've also got a tremendous amount of work going on in hydrogen, right? I mean, hydrogen was a pipe dream that everyone thought was a PR stunt by the Bush administration back in 2002, 2003. Well, today, that technology is ready to go, and many, many scholars now believe that we can't decarbonize the world by 2050 without a substantial greening of our hydrogen economy. And so I've got probably $5 billion worth of applications in for hydrogen. You've got 3 major long line transmission lines that have come in for applications. I mean, I think we've all talked about how valuable transmission is and how difficult it is to finance. So we've got that. We also have a resurgence in battery storage, right? I mean, I think that we invented LFP technology, which is what CATL's using in China to supply Tesla. We invented that here, right? And we sent it to China to get commercialized. Well, we're not doing that anymore. We have the next generation of 5 new battery technologies that are better than what's available today that has come out of DOE, and we're building gigafactories for all of those. That's $10 billion of loan applications that have come in the office. And then the other area that I'm really excited about is we have the best designs for small modular reactors. I know that a lot of people like to make fun of what's happening in Georgia with the Vogtle nuclear plant, which we're a part of. But those are huge projects, and it's difficult to do huge projects. But these small modular reactors they look a lot more like offshore wind machines, super complicated, super difficult, but you can make them in a factory. You make 50 of them a year in the same factory. And so now these projects are $2 billion in size each. And there's a lot of private capital sources that can handle $2 billion that have a hard time handling $27 billion, right? And so we've got $9 billion of applications in Loan Programs Office for nuclear power plants and their associated supply chain. So I think we are going to ramp that back up. And you see all the contracts that we're winning right now because of the Ukraine conflict. There's a lot of Eastern European countries that are moving away from Russian and Chinese designs and moving to US designs from GE, Hitachi, Holtec, and NuScale. So I think you're going to see a huge domination of the small modular nuclear reactor space coming out of our office as well.
And how are you interacting with this $1 trillion plus world in terms of informing them, educating them, engaging them, helping them understand what's coming? Is this going to be based on what you invest in, or is there some more direct way that you're engaging these funds to make them more perhaps interested in taking risks in the way that you're thinking about it, leveraging those additional resources?
Yeah, you have to understand the dynamics of these funds, right? These funds, they're huge funds, right? I mean, when you get $1.2 trillion, right, each fund might actually be $30 billion, right, each. And so when you've got a $30 billion fund, you'd think that there'd be like 300 people that work there. No, there's like 50 or maybe 30, right? And so they basically process paperwork to get stuff through for limited partners that are the world's largest infrastructure investors, right? And so they're just trying to put the money out the door. And so what they want is someone to say, I'm doing this because I trust that person, right? And amazingly enough, right, the Loan Programs Office, we have been investing in very risky technologies for years. And yes, we got berated for one particular loan, but our loss rate is less than 3%, right? The average loss rate in a commercial banking portfolio is 2 to 4%. So we did really cutting edge, leading edge stuff and only lost roughly 3%, right? And so when you think about our due diligence, it is very well respected across Wall Street. And I've gone to all of them and talked to them about it, and they've said, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, you guys do due diligence better than our internal teams do. And if it comes through your office, we're happy to do projects 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And so a lot of what we're doing is reviewing with them our due diligence approach and saying, just want to make sure that if this thing comes through our office, that you're actually going to do projects 2, 3, 4, and 5, because that's the whole point, right? We're supposed to be a catalyst for you. And so just checking in and making sure that you're ready to catch the ball if we throw it your way, right? And that requires, again, trust building. So that means explaining to them what we're doing, why we're doing it, giving them the tools that they need to go and talk to their limited partners. So I've done a couple of limited partner, conversations as well, so that they are getting that message as well. And it's a long process. Don't get me wrong. I've been at it for a year, educating their limited partners, but they're ready to catch the ball, right? I mean, and that process is something as an engineer I shouldn't know much about, but given that I've been doing this stuff since 2003 in the solar financing space, I've learned along the way that this is really more around trust building person to person than it is all the white papers that you can write in the world.
Well, it's exciting. And that's it for me in terms of my questions, Jigar. I guess I want to come back to one thing that you mentioned, which I think would be of interest to people here, is talk a little bit more about what you're saying about what you believe the short, medium term impact of what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, you mentioned it, and you're saying that now there's much more interest in American companies and innovation and rejecting Russian and Chinese designs. Can you just review that again? Because I think that was sort of a new and interesting bit of information.
So, I mean, I think that everyone acknowledges, both parties, that the Department of Energy has been extraordinary in its work to develop new technology. It really has been for decades and decades. I think what we have been less good at is deploying that technology at scale. And when it does happen, I think people view our role in it as tangential. They're like, oh, it happened. There were 20 sectors and 2 of them succeeded. It was sort of random, right? It turns out it's not so random. There's actually real reasons why these dots get connected and then they get over. So when you think about what's happening in Ukraine and the total amount of energy that people are focused on, right? Whether it's releasing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which the president announced yesterday, or whether it's some of the other things, part of this is also demand destruction, right? We've got to figure out how to get people to use less energy using off-the-shelf technologies. We were talking to one of the major real estate owners across the country, and they said, yeah, we know that we could save 10% of all of our fossil fuel usage through these 5 or 6 changes, but we have these issues, right? Landlord-tenant issues where the tenant pay the energy bill, and the landlord is the one who makes the investments because they own the buildings. So there's no way to get reimbursement from the tenants. There's issues around what happens to their debt load, right? And Wall Street is watching people's debt loads very carefully right now in a rising interest rate environment. How do we do that? Well, funny enough, our money can actually bridge a lot of those gaps with non-recourse financing. We can provide people with debt that doesn't sit on their books because we take the energy savings as repayment. We don't need a guarantee from their corporate parent to get a savings. And so now we're going to people and saying, look, could you save 5% of the entire natural gas usage in the United States in the next 24 months by implementing these solutions? And they're like, crap, I guess we could, right? I guess we could. Like, these technologies really are there and they're ready to go. And so when you think about the Herculean effort that everyone is putting in to try to get oil and gas folks to drill more oil, I think part of what we're doing is helping people gain the confidence that we can make the same Herculean effort to get people to use less energy, right? I mean, when you think about the major delivery companies, right? Not only like Amazon and their partnership with Rivian, but also like, Uber and Lyft and Instacart and others. Their drivers are driving an average of 40,000 miles a year, right? For the high end, for the full-time, folks, right? You could imagine what $4 and $5 gasoline prices is doing to them, right? They want to move to electric vehicles next week, right? And they rent their cars on a weekly basis right now, right? So when Hertz has made a commitment to 10,000 vehicles, Hertz was thinking that those vehicles would be for pleasure trips. They're now thinking, hey, maybe we need to transition to helping drivers, for fleets do that. Well, the problem with that is that Hertz's bankers are not happy with that decision because they're used to only having those cars driven 10,000 miles a year. So when you move to 40,000 miles a year, those bankers are saying, wait a second, I don't know whether I like that or not. Well, guess who can actually help with that? Us, right? And so I think when you think about the promise of DOE technology and getting it into the marketplace at scale and speed to be able to influence energy markets, everyone is betting that we can't do that, right? That's what the markets are showing, right? Is that we can't destroy enough oil and gas demand fast enough to be able to show that the forward curves should go down, right? And so the goal is to try to figure out, hey, wait a second, why do they think that? What can we do to change that? What partnerships should we be having, right? Who's got the technology now? Who has the service technicians to implement these things at scale, right? And, is there a role for unions to play in this? Is there a role for low, moderate income households to play in this? How do we actually map this out? And I think that there is a level of interest, and you see that in all the White House communications. There's a level of interest in these solutions now that LPO is actually running well and being trusted by these entrepreneurs.
Well, and I want to, before I turn it open to the audience here to jump in with questions, I just want to say for those watching is that, listen, obviously there's a great story we're hearing today. I think it's important, particularly if we are not able to execute the rest of the president's climate agenda this year, which is certainly possible given the struggles of getting things through the Congress. It's important that we help the public and our political leaders understand the real progress that is being made already, and to create more confidence and a sense, rather than a sense of absence and loss of the things that we didn't do, all the amazing things that we actually are doing. And so I want to just encourage all of you who have forums and, to invite Jigar to come speak. We've already going to set him up with some congressional folks who are on today, or at least had expressed a lot of interest. I think this is a powerful story that he's telling that needs to be heard by more people. And so do what you all can to help us get this story out. We're just doing our part today. But certainly there are many people on this Zoom who can do their part as well. So let me open it up. There are two ways, as all of you know, we're all Zoom warriors now. Two ways to jump into the conversation. One is you can type a question into the Q&A box and I can read it, or if you want to raise your hand, I can call on you. We've got Jigar for another 10, 15 minutes before he's got to take off. Who's got a question for Jigar today? We got
one that came in from Cindy here.
Yeah. Let me just read it for everybody. Thank you. Love what you're doing. As we transition from ICE to EV, we have an enormous opportunity to move urban areas away from private cars to make space for bus, rapid transit, micromobility, pedestrians. Are you prioritizing applications that disincentivize private car ownership while targeting EV infrastructure for necessary fleets, buses, fire trucks, sanitation, and so on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, obviously the word, moving away from private car ownership is somewhat charged. And so I often don't say that. But what I would say is that the vast majority of Americans are living car payment to car payment. So they don't really own their cars, right? I mean, they technically own their cars and they have a car payment on their cars, but AAA says that the average passenger vehicle has about $770 a month of expenses, from insurance to gas to maintenance to the car payment. and that trucks and SUVs are up in the $870 or $900 range per month, right? So when you look at electric vehicles and you look at some of the new business models that are being pitched to us, we are able to provide people with reliable transportation services, particularly with a car, at a far lower price than that, and far less headache, right? So you now have the ability to say, if that car doesn't work, I don't have to go in and get it fixed myself. I can just actually just give it back to the person I rent it from, and then they give me a new car that works that day. Because people need reliable transportation to get to work. And so what I'd say is that most of the movement to electrification is unlocking these kinds of opportunities, because the amount of money that you spend on maintenance, as well as fuel, but maintenance is the biggest thing for electric vehicles, is 90% less than internal combustion engine cars, right? And I think that is something that just is lost on most people. Most people are just focused on the fuel cost and not really focused on the maintenance cost, which is what is unlocking all these advanced business models, so that people can go without owning 3 cars. They can have just 1 car for the family if they own, and the other transportation services they can rent or use at a much cheaper basis.
You know, I own, we're an all electric family. We have a Chevy Bolt and a Tesla 3. I drive the Bolt and I'm a happy Bolt driver. I love my Bolt. And I think that the story of the lack of maintenance costs is not well understood. It is amazing how, you know, I've owned the Bolt for 2.5 years, 2 years, and you know, basically nothing on maintenance, right? I mean, they rotate the tires, which I think they do, I think, in order just to get you in, to try to sell you other stuff. I don't even, you know, it's like, I've never had my tires rotated so often, but it's, there's no maintenance costs. And it's a shocking thing, I think, once you realize how different. And also, I just think the electric cars are just, they drive better, they're better. It's better technology. You know, I don't think that there's a wide enough understanding that this is a technological leap, not just an alternative. And that's something, Jigar, that we need to work on, I think, a little bit. I agree with your assessment of what you're saying, that we've had enormous conversations. You know, I've got 3 kids, and, you know, I've got a daughter in high school, and, you know, I've enjoyed having, I went for a year without a car. I lived in DC without a car for a year. I used Uber, I took buses. We've tried to innovate around this. And I think that a lot of people are willing to do more here and to try to do things differently than they've done in the past, because the cost of a car are very significant, right? And that's even without having an accident or having some major thing happen, which, you know, is a big disruption. But anyway, I'm excited about what you're saying and what we're talking about here, because I've lived it in my own life. And I think that there's real opportunity here for innovation.
Well, let me take David Cousins' question at the end there, and give you one more story there. So when I was at BP, and there was a as a service model that was created around the Capstone microturbine natural gas engine. This was in 2000, and they basically used an as a service model to produce power on site, because natural gas prices were very low in California, and electricity prices were high, and, you know, it was a pretty profitable market. Natural gas prices spiked up, and they couldn't really hedge it, and they all went out of business. And when you look at what we did at SunEdison in 2003, part of the reason we were able to do that and get the banks comfortable with that is because the sun is free, right? So our model was very similar to the natural gas Capstone microturbine model, but because we didn't have the variable price of the natural gas fuel, we were able to hedge it easily because the sun is free, the hedge is free. And so we were able to do that at a much lower cost. And so that story that you're saying, Simon, is one that I've lived through the solar revolution. And I think that, to David's point around how this works, I mean, when you look at a Bolt or some of these other cars that are nicely featured, you know, you're talking about a $35,000 to $40,000 car that's there. But what we're finding is that most internal combustion engine cars are viewed as basically junk when you get to 100,000 miles, right? But the way that EVs work is on charge cycles, not on mileage, right? The battery is on charge cycles, 10,000 charge cycles. And so for many of these vehicles, you really can easily go to 400,000 vehicles, 400,000 miles with that battery. And if you use modern advanced charge software, you can get to 1 million miles, right? So now when you take a $35,000 to $40,000 car and you amortize it over that amount of time, you really can get a low-income consumer into a car for like $125 to $175 a week, which is really competitive compared to the other options that they have in front of them today. And so I really do think that we can serve low-income customers today with today's price points of electric vehicles very cost effectively.
Yeah, and yes, I'm going to move on because I could talk about this for a long time because I think it's fascinating. Because I think one of the greatest challenges I have living without a garage, right? We don't have a driveway or garage, is just how all the people that don't have driveways and garages are going to be able to participate in this. And it's been an urban adventure for sure here in Washington. And I think what I'm doing is legal, but I'm not really sure. Jigar, Tony Hobbs, good friend, he represents Beta Technologies, an innovative electric vertical aircraft company headquartered in Burlington, Vermont. The bipartisan infrastructure law included an expansion of the Advanced Vehicle Technology Manufacturing Program to include additional sectors like aviation. Could you speak to what the Loan Program Office is doing to fold these new industries into the program?
Yeah, so the way that the bipartisan infrastructure law works is that they expanded our authorities, but they didn't allow us to use any of our existing loan authority in those expanded authorities so they could get a 0 score for that. And so we need new appropriated dollars to be able to use those wider authorities. And so what we're doing now is we're talking to all those potential applicants and helping them prepare an application that would qualify and would be moved quickly through our office. But we're not technically allowed to accept the application yet until we get new appropriated dollars into those sectors.
Okay, Dan Carroll, I know my dear friend Dan. 1 minute of jiggerness, please, on critical minerals, grid storage, and thank you for your service.
Well, Dan's amazing. So I think one thing just to think about is obviously critical minerals are a big deal, and we're working hard on them. We've got one of our loans that we're going to be announcing soon will be in the critical mineral space, so we're excited about that. It is clear that we've mapped out all the critical minerals now. We have plenty of lithium, for instance, in the United States. We don't have as much graphite, some of the other minerals, and so those are going to require partnerships with other countries where we might bring the ore here and then process the ore here. And there, even when we do get some of these critical minerals, a lot of the finishing steps are in China. And so Tesla, for instance, has vertically integrated a lot of its mining, but still has to send a lot of their minerals through China for the finishing steps. And so we're going to be bringing a lot of those finishing steps back here in the United States. I'd say the other thing, though, on batteries is that as opposed to solar panel technologies where you've seen crystalline silicon really dominate the solar industry writ large, batteries are going to be diverse, right? So right now, a lot of battery grid scale storage are using lithium ion battery technologies, but there's really no need for them to. And what you'll find is that the car is a much higher payer, a higher price point for those lithium ion batteries than the grid storage folks, and they'll sign longer term contracts. So almost all of the lithium ion battery capacity is going to move to the auto industry, and the grid scale storage industry is going to move to our next generation materials like zinc and iron and other chemistries, many of which don't use any critical minerals, like they're using very commonly available minerals. And so I think you'll see a pretty rapid shift over the next 3 to 4 years away from lithium ion battery for grid storage and more towards these other chemistries that the DOE has spent 30 years researching.
That's an encouraging answer to Dan's question. Dan, good to connect with you again. Question from Simon Clark, another Simon. Jigar, great to have you in this role. Can you talk about how heat pumps in the US and Europe can reduce natural gas requirements and how LPO can accelerate their adoption?
Yeah, this is a funny thing, right? Because I think I put in a random tweet out in the ether and it created a whole bunch of like blowback and or support on heat pumps. So what we know today is, look, I mean, there's lots of data, right? Rewiring America and others have done lots of reports that show that heat pumps are important. Just to be clear, heat pumps are everywhere, right? So the reason why Tesla has such a better miles per kilowatt hour rating is because they use heat pumps for all of their heating and cooling in their cars, right? And so your refrigerators use heat pumps. Even the ice cream vendor on the Smithsonian uses a heat pump, right? So like heat pumps are not weird new technology. They're established technology that is only getting better. Already 20% of all Americans put in heat pumps when they replace their air conditioner with something new, right? And the same thing's true for Europe, it's roughly 25%. And so one of the big challenges that we have is the vast majority of the manufacturing of these units are done in Asia. And then there might be some final assembly that gets done here, but there's very little manufacturing of the core components that get done here. And so a lot of what we're looking at is manufacturing the core components here in the United States. And many of the largest Asian manufacturers of these components have agreed that, you know, under certain conditions, they would actually manufacture them here. And Europe, of course, also wants to see a lot more because, I mean, really to reduce Russian gas by as much as possible, what you really want to do is to replace all air conditioning units with heat pumps, right? An air conditioner and a heat pump are the same thing, to be clear. The component set is basically the same thing. There's about $300 to $500 of additional components in a heat pump versus an air conditioner, because an air conditioner runs one direction, it just cools. The heat pump runs both directions, so it also heats. And so let's say you have a furnace in your home now that runs on natural gas. You can replace your air conditioner with a heat pump. You can set it up so that that heat pump is being used most of the time. And when you are above 30 degrees, let's say, or 25 degrees, the heat pump is way more energy efficient and cost effective than your natural gas unit. And then when you go below 25 degrees, your natural gas unit kicks in. So you don't have to get rid of your natural gas unit, but you would use 70 to 80% less natural gas out of that unit if you ran it this way, particularly in climates like Maryland and South, right, where you don't get a lot of negative 30-degree temperatures. And so this is something that we're really ramping up. I mean, this is part of the demand destruction story is every new air conditioner should become a heat pump. Like it's just something we've got to figure out how to do.
It's a fascinating. We could talk about that for a long time because I think it's.
We should.
I mean, it's we just replaced our HVAC unit or one of our HVAC units here, and you know, there was no conversation on their end about these options, right? And it's so you're again having a public interface to everything that you're doing that's robust and aggressive. You've got an amazing secretary, right, who is one of the most natural born communicators that any of us have ever seen in politics, and that's terrific. And she is vigorous and energetic and just, you know, working her butt off. But
she's the reason I'm here. She's amazing.
Yeah, she's amazing. I've known the former the secretary for a long time, and she's certainly one of the best in the biz. And okay, let me go to one more question and from Dan Ancona, and then we'll wrap. So this is a question from Dan's dad, Dan Ancona Sr., who is one of the first wind energy program managers at DOE in the 70s, wondering if there's a streamlined process in the works for small business working on projects that might not be able to shoulder $100,000 plus proposal process.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, a lot of what we're doing is, so one of the things we've done at the Loan Programs Office is really finish the work on warehouse lines. And so the warehouse lines would still be $100 million to $500 million in size, but they would aggregate up a bunch of $2 million, $3 million, and $4 million projects, right? That can't handle the $100,000 costs of, you know, getting through the program. And so that is exactly what we're doing. And we've got, I think, 4 major platforms that have come in to do that. And so it's so that is exactly how we're solving that problem. Like DOE is never going to really be able to do $2 and $3 million loans or $5 million loans cost effectively. That's just not how our governance system works. But we can greatly reduce the interest rates provided by these platforms that can support the $2, $3, $5, $10 million projects.
Final thoughts, Jigar.
Well, I think the final thought here is that I do think that the way in which the American system commercializes technology is not known. And we do need to figure this out, right? I mean, people keep saying nice things about Germany, Canada, China, other places around commercialization. And we are amazing at it in America. And we self-hate all the time. It's amazing to me how much self-hatred there is around our approach to commercialization. So we've got to educate ourselves on what this looks like, right? We have a couple of major tools. The US government provides tax credits. We all know that they love providing tax credits. We have demonstration dollars that DOE has. Now we have the Loan Programs Office, which was a missing tool, an essential missing tool, which is now there. And we connect a lot of the dots between institutional investors, between technology providers, off-takers, right? There's large corporations now that are promising to buy green cement or green steel or other things to be able to provide the demand signal. And the other component that we have that's very reliable that we continue to discount is state government. The state governments around the country have been very good at providing demand signals, whether it's the state of California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Maryland, et cetera. And so these states, I mean, Illinois recently provided a fantastic piece of legislation. And so these states are the ones who've driven mandates for solar, mandates for wind, mandates now for electric vehicles, mandates for heat pumps, mandates for all of these technologies, right? Which then provides a demand signal for us to be able to raise the money necessary to bring the technologies down the cost curve. So many people were shocked by how cheap solar and wind got. But that is using the learning curve that was invented in 1936. We know how the learning curve works. With every cumulative doubling of experience, you get a certain reduction in cost. We can predict those reductions in cost. And so part of what I want to do is to move all of you, who are the smartest people we have in this country, away from thinking that these climate bills that we're passing in Congress are just throwing a bunch of crap against the wall and seeing what sticks. And instead, we actually have real understandings of what it'll take to bring hydro to scale, what it'll take to bring advanced geothermal to scale, what it'll bring sustainable aviation fuels to scale. And it's a different roadmap for each technology, but we should hold ourselves accountable to reading up and understanding that.
It's great. Jigar, thank you. I promised everybody this would be an uplifting event. It is uplifting in a moment when, my Twitter feed is just all day long, just terrible news coming out of Ukraine. And that, a lot of the work that NDN has been doing in the last 6 to 9 months has been to try, you said something I think it's really important, is that we have, to a degree, lost confidence in ourselves as a country. And I think that, today I put out my monthly, jobs report, our take on the jobs report. And, 4 times, the amount, the productivity of the American economy and the ingenuity of the American people and the work, the things that have happened in this country, the amount of jobs that have been created, the amount of output that's happened, the number of people who've moved to new jobs. We had more new businesses formed last year than any year in American history in the middle of a pandemic, right? Just the incredible capacity of this country is because of the people, the remarkable people of this country. And I will tell you that I think that part of our challenge is to help us find confidence again and joy and belief in ourselves again after it's been shaken through lots of events, because we still are the most remarkable country in the world. We still are doing extraordinary things. We have enormous capacity, and we have to stop living in so much negative space, right? To your point, I mean, I think that the default right now, I mean, we just went through, arguably last year was one of the best economies in the history of America. And only 25–30% of Americans think the economy was better last year than it was the year before. And there's just so much negative space and negative stuff happening. And part of our job, people who know better, is to give people like you, Jigar, frankly, who are doing remarkable things and making the future happen. We've got to give you a bigger platform to help us, find our mojo again as a country. Because it's there. I mean, this is just, and what's great to hear you today, I didn't know much of what you went through. This is a big, important story that you told us today. And all of you, I need your help in creating platforms for Jigar to tell this story in the coming months. I think that it will help a lot for those that care about this issue, who care about climate change, that care about American innovation, the capacity for us to tackle this, to have faith that we can achieve the things that he's laid out. I come away more convinced now than I was before that these things are within our grasp. We just have to we got to put our head down, get to work, and work together to get it done. So Jigar, thanks for what you're doing. Let us know how we can be helpful. I know that there are some congressional folks who reached out who have interest in having you come by and visit. From the invitation went out today, I'm working with your Brian and your able team to get that done. And thanks everybody. Keep up the good work, Jigar.
Thanks, Simon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.